I am wholly divided and stretched, bent inside out, tickled with words until they pierce my double-layered skin. I am full. You see me as a shell, a coloured canvas you already painted, shaped in your mind. But I am fantastically overloaded with paint already, dear. Formed in the womb of my mother. Colours finished in working progress. The world just hasn't caught up yet. Hi there, and welcome to the podcast Ali Her Hairs and Shy by me, Alice. For my fourth episode, I am looking into a very much inflamed topic, race, or more specifically, mixed race. This episode will be somewhat different to my previous ones, and a lot more personal. I am mixed race myself, and growing up in a world with predominantly white people around me, I had quite a few interesting experiences, and a somewhat difficulty forming my identity within my skin. Growing up, I didn't understand that it was microaggressions that made a knot in my stomach by the constant questions of what I was, or where I was really from, or whether I was adopted by my white mother. It might sound trivial to people who don't experience this, but these constant microaggressions put you in a category of other, not like us, not belonging fully, which does something to your sense of identity, especially when you're young. From what we know of the psychology of in and out groups, in is definitely better than out. There is a reason we have this excessive need to fit in during our forming teenage years. And actually, research done by MacDonald and Leary shows that the part of the brain that lights up from social exclusion is the same as for physical pain. And so, being excluded in society through microaggressions or direct racism, which also occurs from time to time, I'd say it's like being bitten by mosquito after mosquito every day for years, with the occasional sting by a bee. And it doesn't take much reading of Carl Jung and his theory on the individuation process to know that the messages you get from society is important for the forming of any identity. And in turn, the forming of identity is important for your understanding of your existential self. So it's pretty important, in other words. As a mixed-raced individual, I experienced a constant cognitive dissonance as to who I was because of the constant invasive and conflicting messages from society as to who I should be. Not only are mixed-race people othered, we are at the same time, in my opinion, discursively non-existing. Being asked, "What are you?" implies that I am not enough in my own skin and that I must belong somewhere to be someone. And the word "what" sends an interesting message of me being less human until I can find a group to put myself in. But with one foot in each camp, and neither allowed to get a steady grip, I internalised this message for a long time. And I know I'm not the only mixed-race person feeling this way, as was confirmed by my first guest for this podcast series. For this episode, I am happy to say I was lucky enough to get a chat with founder and editor of Intermix, Sharron Hall. She is the winner of the Millennium Award for her not-for-profit website Intermix. She gives information about the mixed-race world and offers support to mixed-race people who might find it hard to navigate the boxes of either-or laid out for us by society. As the saying goes, it isn't black or white. It can, as a matter of fact, be both, and everything in between. And exactly this is what Sharron wants the world to think about a little bit more.
Intermix is an online space, basically, for anybody who's part of the mixed race experience. So you don't actually have to be mixed race, but obviously it's predominantly for people who are mixed race. But you can be part of a mixed race family, you can be in a mixed relationship, you can be transracially adopted, you might work with lots of mixed race people, you know, you could be a school teacher or a counsellor or lots of different things. Or you could be just a student studying mixedness, because there's lots of information there for everyone. People just go and have a look around and learn things that they didn't know about the mixed experience, and that's what I wanted.
So it's a learning environment that you're looking for?
It is a learning environment, and I think education is really important, especially for mixed race individuals, because they go to school, they don't hear anything about being mixed. They don't even realise there's such a thing as mixed race history. And, you know, you can actually talk to monoracial people and they'll say, oh, there's no such thing. But it's there. It is definitely there. It's just that sometimes it's hidden within other groups' histories.
So what's the focal point of what you teach?
Basically, for mixed race people to be able to embrace all of their heritage so that they're not forced into denying part of their heritage, because media already does that, society already does that. They like to put people in boxes and they say, oh, well, you know, you look predominantly black, so you're black, and you look predominantly white, so you're white. So it's a place where mixed race people can come and feel comfortable. And for a lot of mixed race people, that's never happened before, because even their parents and even their families and friends will try and put them in these boxes. And this is somewhere they can come and learn what it's like just to be able to embrace everything.
What are the stories that you get from mixed race people?
The most common thing people say, oh, it's what are you? You know, they're always being asked, what are you? And the answers are very similar, and it doesn't matter what their mixed background is. So you'll get some people who are black and white mix, or some people who might be Asian and white, or Asian and black, or Iraqi and French, whatever, and they all get the same thing. They always get asked the question, what are you? And the good thing about them coming to somewhere like Intermix is that they find answers. They then feel comfortable to say, well, actually, I'm racially mixed and this is what my background is. And they also realise that even though the question upsets you when you get asked it, it's part of people learning about who you are. And instead of seeing it as a negative thing, you know, to try and turn it into a positive experience, which it can sometimes be difficult, but it helps, because for a lot of mixed race people, they have a lot of negative things surrounding them. So it's good to look for ways to try and turn these into more positive experiences.
What prompted you to start this organisation?
I have 2 daughters, and my oldest daughter looks like me. She's just a little bit lighter, but she looks like me, and she has, you know, curly hair, etc. But my youngest daughter, Lauren, looks completely white. If you see her walking down the road and you don't know what to look for, you kind of think she was white. And when she was at school, she started having really bad experiences. White people would actually make racist comments in front of her because they think she's white, so they felt comfortable to do that. And she found that really upsetting, and then other children would tease her and say, oh, you're adopted, that's not really your mom. And she'd come home and she'd say, Mommy, why can't I be brown like you? And I was quite distressed. I just didn't know what to do, how to answer the questions that she was asking me. So I started to look around to see if there was an organisation. And I did find an organisation, and this organisation was run by parents of mixed race children. And what they were recommending is that you tell your mixed race child that she's black. Now, I couldn't tell Lauren that she's black, because when she looks in the mirror, she knows she's definitely not black. That would just be causing her confusion. And also, when I was growing up, I'd had a lot of bad experiences within the black community where I was told quite many times, you're not black. So I knew I couldn't describe myself as black. So why would I expect, her to describe herself as black? So I decided then the only thing I can do is set up my own organisation, which comes from a mixed perspective. So, it doesn't... I mean, if you want to describe yourself as black, you're perfectly, it's your choice to do that. But I wanted to give people other options. And it just took off. I got a really, really good response, especially from mixed race people who said, oh gosh, there's never been anything for us.
Because of my exterior, many people expect to know everything about why I look the way I do when they meet me, as if I owe them this information. And if I refuse to disclose it, people often see me as rude, or that I have something to hide. I was actually almost hit by a drunk woman a few years ago for refusing to tell her where I was really from. The simple fact is, I don't feel like talking about my skin colour all the time. It isn't the most interesting thing about me, and if you got to know me, you'd realise that. I'd argue that this kind of communication is a form of discursive imperialism, as explained by Gayatri Spivak. Because when I call this out, I am either not heard or not taken seriously a lot of the time, which in turn means my minority voice doesn't count as much as the majority's claim that something is not racist. See, racism isn't only on ground level, it's in the structures, in our discourses for what is true and who holds the truth. And so, as Michel Foucault argues, being freed physically does not mean you are free, as we internalise norms holding us where we were, just in different ways than before. And this is unfortunately not noticeable by the majority on a personal level, and so lack of progress in practice is overlooked due to major progress in theory. Don't get me wrong, I do think it is important to acknowledge and celebrate whatever steps forward we take in society. I strive for a balance of optimism for the possible change to come with a realism of what needs to change. In other words, I am trying to navigate not getting myself totally down by my experiences, but at the same time not going all poopity-scoop out on it either.
It is about identity, but it's not the only thing about your identity. I mean, one of the things that people used to say to me all the time is, oh, mixed race people, like, they're really confused about their identity. But then, I'm a social scientist, and when I studied identity, I realised identity is made up of so many more things than just the colour of your skin. So, your identity is fluid, it's always changing. Now, I see myself as a mixed race woman, and in this society, regardless if some white people may see me as black, I put them in their place and I say, no, I'm actually mixed. But, I've just come back from the Caribbean. I was in the Caribbean for 10 weeks and there I'm white. And no matter what I say, people just, they won't listen to me. I say, no, look at my hair, look at my nose, look at my skin. I am not white. But they don't care because they associate whiteness with being British and having that privilege. Do you know what I mean? It's not just the colour of your skin. So there can be people over there who are lighter than me, but who are born there and they're not seen as white. But because my colour of my skin is coupled with coming from the UK, I am seen as white. And I know that happens in Africa. I was in Barbados. I was in Trinidad, Tobago. Like, no matter where I went, I'm white. And it was just like really bizarre for me.
It's an interesting thing how it changes with culture and where you are in the world. It just shows how fluid race really is.
Yeah. I mean, I think certainly in this country, it can be very painful depending on where you grow up. Certainly, I know in London, my children grew up in London and they haven't experienced very much racism. And, sometimes when I'm talking to them about Intermix and they go, yeah, but Mum, that's never happened to me. I don't understand what you're going on about. But you talk to someone who grew up in Cornwall or Newcastle or somewhere like that, and you'll see the pain, that they experience. And, you learn all over the world there are people having very bad experiences because they happen to look different from everybody else. And that's the big crutch of it, is looking different. Because there are plenty of mixed race people who can blend. There are mixed race people who may have straight hair, light skin, and you might think they're Italian or, and they can get away with fitting in a lot easier. There's a study done a few years ago in schools in Birmingham by Shabby Caballero, who's a social scientist, and Leon Tickley. And they actually went into schools and interviewed teachers and children to find out the sort of assumptions that teachers have about mixed race children. And the assumptions were that, they came from broken families and, they couldn't concentrate at school and they're more likely to have mental health problems and things like that. And you just think, gosh, we shouldn't still be thinking like that, but people do. So you're constantly going against what society thinks. And like for me, it was really important to try and get some positive stories out there. I mean, basically, we just need to have more positive portrayals. So anytime there was anybody mixed that was being successful at anything, I had to get the story out there. But also to then show people that there were different stories that you weren't going to see on the news. There were stories that maybe weren't so positive, but they were important to mixed race people. So for instance, the story about... have you heard of Rabbit Proof Fence, the film Rabbit Proof Fence? Well, Doris, anyway, she's a mixed Aborigine woman. She's passed on now. But basically, in Australia, in the 70s, there were lots of mixed race children who were Aborigine and had mixed with the whites in Australia. And what the Australians did was they took them away from their Aborigine parents and either put them into homes or put them working for white families. And they were not allowed to have anything to do with Aborigines. They weren't allowed to marry Aborigines. They weren't allowed to befriend them or be around them. And what the Australian government were more or less doing was trying to breed the Aborigine out of them. And many of them never ever found their families again.
What do you think this need for a label, like a clean label, comes from? When this mixed, we've been around for a long time, but I still feel like, I'm not often seen as a part of the demographic.
Well, I hate labels, but the thing about labels is sometimes it allows you to address something directly. I mean, I hated the term multiple heritage and dual heritage. They referred to something different than race, so I didn't like the way they used that to describe mixed race people. And they were trying to do it because they didn't want to use the term mixed race, because they don't want to use that word race, which is a socially constructed word. But all words are socially constructed. I mean, it's ridiculous. And as long as racism exists, you have to use the word race. You can't do away with it. And for mixed race people, it is because they are racially mixed that their life chances are different, that people look at them differently. And so for me, I really wanted to use the term mixed race because I wanted everybody who's mixed race to know that I'm talking about them, that I'm trying to improve things for them and make a difference. I don't know if you know, in America, they had the one-drop rule, and the one-drop rule is only aimed at mixed race people. It's not aimed at black people. Because if you're black, you know you're black. You don't need anyone to tell you. You know you're black. But this one-drop rule, meaning that anybody that had one drop of black blood was black, caused lots of confusion for mixed race people. So imagine you had one drop of black blood and you look completely white, and then now they're telling you that you're black. How do you feel looking in the mirror and with your experiences? Because you might have that tiny bit of black that goes back generations. You've got no experience of the black community whatsoever, no experience of black culture, but all of a sudden you're black. And it was very controversial in America. But the other thing that it did was that it actually erased mixed race people away from history. Certainly in this country, mixed race is used as the acceptable face of black. You know, we all know that the white community doesn't necessarily want anything too dark. So where they have to put black faces, they will put mixed race faces. Now, if that mixed race person is describing herself as black, he or she can be used in that way. But if they say, actually, I'm mixed race, why are you describing me as black? I'm mixed race. Then they will have to use a black person, because that's the only way we can start to tackle racism and shadism. And obviously, the lighter you are in society, the better your life chances. And if you're going to change society and put an end to racism, you start at the bottom. You don't start halfway. So I would rather see more people with very dark skin being used in advertising and being the faces of companies and things like that, rather than, you turn on the TV in the UK and all you see is mixed faces all the time. It's like they've suddenly thought if they use a mixed race person, it makes everyone happy, but it actually doesn't. There's a lot to be tackled as far as the media is concerned and their portrayals of mixedness.
I want to go back to the one drop rule, because I remember, because growing up myself, I only saw white people and I didn't walk around with a mirror. So in my head, I identified more with, being Norwegian, and being Norwegian in Norway is often seen as being white. And I was constantly reminded, by other people, othered a little bit, you're not like us. And then when Obama became president, he was the first black president. And I remember thinking, but he's mixed, so am I black then? Because he's black. I remember I went through like an existential kind of almost crisis at that time, because I had to figure out, do people see me that way? Because I hadn't yet found myself.
That's one of the things that caused you confusion, and that is what society is doing to mixed race people. It's causing us to have confusion by saying that, look at Obama, this is a black person, when we know he has a white mother. He was brought up by his white mother. So as far as I'm concerned, he's mixed. Now, he may describe himself as black, and he is perfectly within his rights to do that. Society can see that he has a white mother, and because he has a white mother, he has white privilege. That white privilege got him into university, got him to Harvard, and allowed people to treat him a certain way. And I know I've had a lot more privilege being mixed than being black, and that has to be acknowledged. Obama is not the first black president. He's the first mixed president. Great. It's great that we had a mixed president. But it'd be even better if we had a black president.
On that note, how did you find the whole Meghan Markle spectacle in the media?
Well, Meghan Markle isn't the first mixed royal, because Charlotte Mecklenburgh was Queen of England. Go and research Charlotte Mecklenburgh. She was married to George III. She was mixed, Austrian and African. And there's a picture of her in Buckingham Palace, and believe you me, she's very mixed. But in them days, mixedness wasn't even thought about that much. And, I think generally they just tried to hide it, really. I like Meghan Markle, don't get me wrong. I like her and I like Prince Harry. I don't actually think it's going to change very much for mixed race people in this country. She's already championed feminism. Feminism is, there's so many things that need to change in the lives of women. So I think if she wants to champion that, great. I can't expect her to champion mixedness because it's not easy, for one. It's very difficult when you're a royal, you know. We can't expect her to do it. It's not going to change anything except that the media now might use the term mixed race a little bit more than they used to, because they can't say she's black now, can they? It is changing, because I mean, I could tell you that 20 years ago, people weren't using the term mixed race. And now they use it, and they're using it a lot. So already, in a space of 20 years, which isn't very much really, already that change has happened. Already young people see more people like themselves. And they see people like themselves attaining things.
I want to ask you about, what are the biggest hoops you think we still need to jump through? Because for me, I think one of the things that I've realised when I was little, when people said that they were colourblind, I took that as a positive thing. I was like, oh, that's great, I'm just like you. But as I grew up, I realised, well, I'm not just like you, and I don't have that privilege of being colourblind. And so for me, I think that's the kind of thing I'm still kind of explaining to friends.
Whenever anybody says to me colourblind, I just think, no. Like, I think you're living in another world. There are some hoops to be jumped through. I think the biggest hoop for me, there's several. One is terminology. So for me, I would like everybody to adopt the term mixed race. Not because they think it's great, but so we can move forward to the next level and stop squabbling about what's the correct term, just so we can all come together and move forward. So that's one. And another is ordinariness. Now, as far as I'm concerned, we are ordinary, just like everyone else. And once that becomes the norm, I think incidences of racism and shadism and that will become less. Because people seem to base everything on looks. And they look at you, and because you look different from them, they think, oh, you look exotic, you look interesting, blah, blah, blah. But they don't realise that looks are such a very small part of life. The other thing is to get society to see mixed race people as, even though we're the same as everybody else, we have different needs from other groups.
For those who can't join your amazing organisation, Intermix, do you have any tips on books to read? There's
a book called Achievements of Mixed Race People by Asher and Martin Hoyles. And that book is quite useful. It's like 30 biographies, 15 people who are past and 15 people who are alive now. And it's just a little introduction about each person, what their background is, and, you know, etc.
I want to end this conversation with, if you have anything that, like a message or something that you want to say to the audience.
If I'm addressing mixed race people, I would say to them, just be yourself, embrace all that you are, and just know that, you know, being mixed is not everything. It's just a small part of who you are. And that if you embrace all cultures, because all cultures have something rich to offer, you can never go wrong. You know, you just become this person that's just full of so many things.
I feel like that's a perfect note to end it on. Thank you so much for talking with me. Sharron Hall, if the audience is interested in getting in touch with you, then go on the intermix.org.uk and you can read what Sharron's writing about and reach you as well.
Yeah, you can reach me, just contact at intermix.org.uk. Yeah, go on the website, there's lots of information there. And anyone's got any stories, anybody mixed out there that's got any stories, they want to send us their stories, then yeah, I'm always happy to read them.
Great. On that note, thank you so much for talking with me.
You're welcome.
I would love to hear your thoughts on today's topic. You can reach me and comment on the podcast's Twitter account at Ali Hairs and Shy, the podcast Instagram account, Ali Her Hairs and Shy, or go to the Tumblr blog About Ali. For instant updates on new episodes, subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spreaker, or the podcast player app. And if you want to get in touch with Sharron, Or if you simply want to learn more about the topic, you can visit the site intermix.org.uk. Thank you for listening to my 4th podcast episode, Mixed Race. I'm Alice. Until next time.